Welcome to the Pantheon Plus Rewind. What's up? Welcome to the podcast we like to call The Rewind. If you're new around these parts, well, you're in for some Pantheon Rise of the Fallen discussion for about the next hour or so. We here at Pantheon Plus are passionate about MMOs, and in particular, one that promises to bring back challenge, community, and an immersive world. On this episode of The Rewind, we're catching up on the overflowing mailbox with all your Pantheon questions and enjoying lots of lore as we continue our reading of The Bait, Part 2. My name is Theric, and at my side is my druidic co-host Desrin, as always. So take a seat by the fire and please enjoy this week's Rewind. So Desrin, I've talked a few times on the show about my teenage sons, and but the truth is, I do have a third child that doesn't get mentioned very much. He's about 1.5 feet tall. Yeah, he runs pretty fast, and his name is Reno. And no, I don't have a gnomish sprinter for a child. He's actually a little mini Aussie Shepherd dog. So he is the third member of our little family here. A fifth, actually. But this was a tough week because he wasn't feeling too great, and we had to take him to the vet. And turns out he has a mild case of pancreatitis, which I didn't even know what that was, to be honest with you. I had to learn it from the vet. So the good news is it is mild and it can be treated with meds, and it's really not, it's not the worst thing in the world. The hard part is that, as anybody out there who knows who has a pet and has a dog that likes treats a lot, they get accustomed to that. And this part of the deal with this is that's might have been what caused the pancreatitis to some extent.
No.
Is a few too many treats here and there. So no bits of food that accidentally, in air quotes, hits the floor sometimes. No nothing, right? And he's taken it pretty hard, and it made me sort of realize that he's those innocent requests to play are usually just ways for him to get treats. But it hasn't been easy, but I think I've managed it. I think we're coming through, and he's gonna be okay. So tough love, but that's how it is. But that's what's happening around here. What's up with you this week, man?
Oh man. Well, I mean, I have my own dog stuff as usual, as anyone that's been on Discord with me knows. But I've been playing New World. Coming up, this would be yesterday by the time this airs. There is a annual Star Citizen convention that's happening digitally that I'm using as an excuse to also digitally get together with a lot of my friends. We're gonna have a bit of a Discord party, and all watch the panels together, eat snacks, drink booze, and have a great time as we go through all the imagine ifs that come with Star Citizen. But it's going to be a good time. We're just going to enjoy it. But
nice.
I also I had a bit of a fumble, and I burned my wrist pretty badly. I don't want to take a screenshot, real life screenshot. I don't want to take a picture because it's kind of gross. But I realized there's something you can tell if you know someone that has worked in food service. We all do this thing where anything can happen to our body, and and we just won't have a reflex, right? So I'm making some sauce. And I just jerk the pan sideways for some stupid reason. I don't know why. And it just splashes straight up on the underside of my wrist while I'm holding the pot,
Oh my God.
And I'm just staring at my wrist as I slowly, carefully put the pot down, going, ow, 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 but no reaction or anything. It's just, I haven't worked in food service in years, but that still happens.
Yeah, you're still conditioned to that reaction. That's crazy. Yeah, no, I mean, I worked in food service for a little while back in the day, and I was lucky. I escaped unwounded for the most part, although I know lots of people who have permanent scars from grease burns and burning themselves on hot stuff in the kitchen. Like my wife, she's a great cook, baker, but she burns herself all the time, taking stuff out of the oven because whatever, she just, I don't know, just, coordination or whatever. But yeah,
it's a dangerous job, but someone's got to do it. So,
someone has to make cookies for me. Yeah, that's right. I don't want her to stop. I'll take the burns and I still get the good baking out of it. So I'm okay with it. But yeah, take care of that. Take care of that injury, then. I don't want you to be don't want you to be laid up for your Star Citizen con.
Yeah, I think I'll be fine.
You'll be okay. Nice. All right, man. Well, last week on the premiere, we had a pretty epic week. Yeah. We had a 10-person, sort of a mini raid, I'll say, forming up during the premiere. And we want to thank our raiders who donated during the YouTube premiere. So let's get to it and thank Shuriken on the Dwarf Cleric, Sparrow on the Elf Ranger, Bounty Code on the Human Wizard, Archbishop on the Dark Mer Paladin, which is cool. I don't think we've ever had a Paladin in the party, to be honest with you. Brian Reck on the Gnome Summoner, Dimlos on the Dark Mer Enchanter, Jason, the Scar Beard Lord, is back again after a little bit of an absence, which is nice. Shoddy, who I believe is a new member of the party, never been in the party before. Yeah, on the Dark Mer Enchanter. And Shoddy is also a huge Chicago Bears fan, just like me. So he is he gets my vote of approval. And then lastly, Redbeard Flynn on the Dark Mer Summoner. So lots of good folks in the party this week, and you as well, my friend. You get to be the raid leader because you also donated during the show.
I can join in the fun, man. Like,
I have to admit, it caught me a little off guard. I was like, oh, okay. Like,
why not?
Hey, thanks, man. Yeah, why not, man? Absolutely. So our Archai Druid raid leader is here. Are you going to be calling out the assists? Are you going to be directing reses and doing your thing or what?
Yeah, absolutely. We're probably going to need a couple reses after this show's over with these spicy topics. So
we do have some spicy rewind questions. A mailbox that's almost on fire this week. So yeah, you might have your work cut out for you there on the Archai Druid. So if you guys want to join the adventuring party for next week and you're here for the YouTube premiere, you can go ahead, hit that donate button. Let us know what your future Pantheon racing class is going to be, and we'll send you a group invite. And, if nothing else, we'll put you on the graphic at least. So all donations go to support the show as always. And we always aim to give back to the community as much as possible with giveaways and such whenever we can. So long introduction, but we got a good show stored for you, in line for you here. So, hey, Desmond, you want to get to it?
Let's do it.
This week in Visionary Realms News and Notes. All right, so nothing official from Visionary Realms this week, so we aren't going to do a news and notes segment, but I just want to do a quick housekeeping mentions. Firstly, we do get the occasional comment with the videos here where people confuse Pantheon Plus with the company that's actually making Pantheon, that being Visionary Realms. I just want to use this space to clarify, remind everyone that we are not Visionary Realms. We are not the creators of Pantheon. We are simply a fan community that makes Pantheon and MMO-related content. And while we have a good relationship with Visionary Realms, we get the occasional interview with them. We've been lucky enough to get approval to do some exclusive reveals and such. Again, we're just folks who follow the game's development closely and bring that to you. So just wanted to clarify that. Mm-hmm. And the other thing I wanted to mention is with regard to Pantheon content, we have been putting out the Pantheon Plus calendar, which is, like we talked about when Drac was on the episode, a little bit of a similar to situation of what VR is doing with their monthly content calendar, giving people a chance to see what we're working on for our content, whether that's streams, fan fiction, articles, videos, all that good stuff, what we're doing this week. And we try to give you a calendar so you can see what day something might be coming out on, what you want to pay attention to. And so helping the goal being to help everybody stay Pantheon patient. So if you're looking for that calendar, you can find it on Discord, in our Discord, which again is in the comments or in the description. You'll find a link to that. It's also, we tweet it out on Twitter. You can follow the Pantheon Plus Twitter feed to get that. But and then go to the website, pantheon.plus, and all our content is listed there as well. So, yeah, quick and easy VR news and notes this week. Let's get to the mailbox. Mail on a Sunday? That's right. Let's check the mailbox. Okay, so Des, I'm going to let you take this first question here. You wanna read this one, and this is sort of a four-parter question, so we'll take it in pieces. But
Yeah.
why don't you start us off here?
All right. So this one's from Seraphita. Posted this a little while ago in our Discord. They say, my question is more of a discussion topic to hear community thoughts that can be touched on by a series of questions. So here are the questions. So the first one is all player friction good? And if not, what types are good and what types are bad? Whew.
Yeah, this is one of those. I like these kinds of questions. Some people don't like the psychology type questions, but I know you do, and I do as well. What do you think? What do you think, man?
Okay. Well, I mean, of course, like not all friction is good. Like, there's a big difference between friction that leads to gameplay opportunities and friction that leads to, out of game issues like feelings of grief, anger, even like assault, because like that happens.
Yeah.
So obviously that kind of friction is bad, and so I think the goal would be to have any friction have some sort of in-game way to manage it, right? So no, it's not all good, but
yeah, I think for the sake of this question, I mean, you do have to define what they're talking about when you say player friction, right? And the way that I hear it and the way that I'm conceptualizing it for this question is it's competition and conflict within the game that's done in the service of achieving something that's like contested, some limited or contested resource, right? This is not talking about like harassment or abusive behavior or anything like that. That's not friction. That's like something that's the next level that, of course is unacceptable. This is more like, where's the line when it comes to like disagreements and arguments, right? And it makes me think, so sometimes we're kind of attracted to conflict. Sometimes when you're perusing through Discord, right? Sometimes it's a lot of chatter, but then you see like somebody arguing about something. You see somebody, sort of provoking, doing something like that, just to get a rise or start a discussion. And I think we tend to be drawn to that kind of thing, like it's whether it's Discord, whether it's there or on social media, wherever, we want to know what's going on. We kind of, it's like driving by a car accident, right? You do look, you want to see what's going on. And so when I hear this question, I think a certain amount of player friction is something that actually makes MMOs interesting.
yeah.
So I don't want to eliminate it, like I don't want to take it all out because, MMOs, as they're supposed to be, in my mind, are social games and conflict and Discord, not the app, actually Discord is part of the human equation, right? And if you sanitize an MMO of that, you kind of dehumanize it, right?
Right.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I feel like that's maybe part of the reason MMOs are in the place they're at is that they've continuously tried to, forgive me, audience, if this comes across too spicy, but try to shelter. I feel they try to shelter the player and like keep them in a bubble, and it actually ends up making it less of a multiplayer game, right?
Yeah.
And so
too much sealed off, right? Too enclosed in your own echo chamber of only the things that I say or only the things that I think are okay are what I'm going to hear, right?
Yeah.
There's a little bit of there's a little bit too much separation of the player from the community, I think, and it's because of a fear of friction. I think there's too much fear of friction. But like I said, when it goes too far, that's the problem, is that when it goes too far and it becomes something else, we don't differentiate between that anymore, right? Then it becomes, well, it's all the same thing.
Yeah, and that's, I think, kind of the differentiating thing I was kind of trying to get at the beginning is if the friction in game is a springboard for those external bits of friction, it might be kind of borderline or too far, you know, like, and I'm not talking about like, oh, you know, such and such guild is calling out, you know, whatever for their own like personal drama, like that can happen regardless. Like that's just people. But you know, if you set the game up in a way that actually like leads to people being aggressive, you know, towards each other, personally, that's the kind of conflict that maybe shouldn't be in a video game.
You know, so it's the idea here, and what I go to right away is what causes that, you know, like what leads to that. And it's usually competition, right? It's competitive, limited resources, people want it. I'll tell you a funny story about something that happened in New World last week when I was playing. I found and this is, you'll laugh at this because you probably experienced this at some point too, but I found a really good spot for iron mines, right? And if you're playing New World, you understand iron mines
big.
are just, iron's big. You never run by it, you always take it. And somebody had found a spot where there was like 4 nodes in a row, and they were on some sort of like frequent respawn. I don't know if it was intended, but they were respawning real quick. And I found the same spot. And I saw him or her, whoever it was, going around mining. And I said, well, I'm going to get on this. So I went to, you know, where they were on the cycle. I just went to the opposite end and I started mining that node. And they ran up to me. And I had a feeling they were going to get upset because I just had I had that vibe, right?
That body language, you ran up to me.
Yeah. I kind of saw it coming, right? So I started mining the node. And the dude runs up to me and says, hey, man, you're stealing my iron, like in chat or whatever. And I was like, what?
My iron.
Your iron? How is this your iron? And he got really, you know, I just actually what I didn't even respond in chat. I just started dancing because I thought it was kind of funny.
So Theric is throwing like oil on the fire.
A little bit. But this is what I'm talking about. This is the kind of friction that's entertaining, right? I'm not being toxic. I'm not being I'm not doing anything that's over any kind of line. This is the game, right?
Yeah.
And I went to the next node and he kept following me from node to node. And he was just, you know, he kept saying, you know, hey, you know, you're on my node, you know, get out of here. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. But this is the kind of thing that I'm talking about. And I think that's good for MMOs. I think that kind of like, you know, it's not like he or I were doing anything really wrong.
Right.
But it led to an interesting situation, I think, for me at least. Maybe he was angry. I wasn't angry. I just thought it was funny, but you know.
Also, I don't want to go too far into this, but like I just have another like kind of alongside that story that I just had last night, where I was actually like leapfrogging a guy for some hemp. And he was from a different faction, you know, and so I was, you know, jokingly, I'm like, you know, whatever, like he go find his own. But we were just leapfrogging for like, I don't know, a whole minute as we're like getting the next node. And then like kind of that's that. And I end up in this cave full of pretty nasty dudes. And I see him in there and he's overwhelmed. And he's from the other faction. And I have to have this like moral check in my head.
What do I do now?
Do I save this guy? And you know what I did? I saved him and revived him. And you know what? We talked for about 10 minutes after that, just in in-game voice. He's from the UK, and we were just kind of talking about the server and like what's going on and internet and all this.
That's
like,
awesome.
And that is only possible. And we totally joked about like stealing each other's nodes too. Like, but that's like, that's only possible because the game was open enough to let me do that. Right.
Right.
Where if it was a closed encounter, I would just have to watch him die and just be like, sorry. Like, so yes, conflict can breed some pretty awesome social interactions. I had a friend in high school that we literally became best friends for like 6 years because we got into a fight.
I've had that happen too. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so I think you're spot on. Like there has to be friction. There has to be conflict in a sense, but it also has to be able to give rise to positive outcomes as well. If it's only negative outcomes that can arise from it, it should probably be scrapped. So, yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing I should take away from this conversation is that I should learn from you on how to handle these situations rather than how I handled it. Because dancing at taking his iron was not the correct response, apparently.
I will say that my actions in that particular situation were the exception to my usual. So I'm not going to pretend I'm some saint here, but it turned out well that time. So, but nice. Man, we're only on part A here.
I know. We got to move on.
Okay. So the next sub question here is going to be: should Pantheon have a guiding philosophy or tenet on this subject to use as a rubric to filter ideas through? And I mean, I think I have just kind of a quick thing is I think they already do. They're thinking about this, especially because they're so focused on it being a social game. I think this is probably very high up on the list of something they're trying to balance.
Yeah, I would assume you're right. Although I will say that I'd like to hear more about this from them because they have alluded to it. They haven't talked about how they're going to manage. I've been an advocate for active GMs. Like we've kind of gotten away from active GM in the game, involved, in the community. I think that's probably where this needs to go. But I would like to hear from VR about their nuts and bolts of how they're actually going to, what their filter is for friction and player friction, because I think it is something that's highly relevant to their game. So.
Yeah, just like lay out, like, where's your line? Or like, where's the line in Pantheon? That would actually be a really interesting post. I mean, probably not a very popular one, but I would find it very interesting.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, we have to, toxic player communities is such a buzzword these days in MMOs, right? Like, and you don't want that label on your game. So that's what the companies are afraid of. But on the other hand, you don't want a Care Bear community either. It's almost worse, right? Like it's and I say that, with all due respect to I don't know, other games that have really gone above and beyond to make sure their communities are safe places, I guess. I don't know. But I just feel like we've gotten a little bit away from our nature where we allow for conflict and friction. So it's a good question. I really like that question from Serafita, and I remember they brought it up in the chat last week during the premiere, and I'm glad that they posted it in the rewind question. So good question.
Because I mean, I see good questions all over, but I'm like, I know I'm going to lose this, so please put it in the Discord.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
cool.
So like the final bit of that, I think we kind of went over just to do it justice by saying the whole question. It was how much friction is too little and how much is too much. Like, where is the line? We pretty much went over that. Do you think?
I think so too. I think that I think we covered all the points I wanted to make here. Yeah. I don't think we need to say anything else about that.
Okay, awesome. Well, great questions there, Vita. Thanks for posting that.
And the next one comes from Walking Waste. So they said, I have a question about the quaternity in Pantheon. So do you think the enchanter being the quaternity?
This is how you pronounced it. It was like
how would you pronounce the croissant of Pantheon?
Sorry.
The quaternity. Let's say it like that.
Thank you. Sorry.
Okay, now I can't say it without hearing that in my head.
This is how you guys know it's candid, by the way.
Yeah, that's right. So we'll just skip that and we'll say, do we think the Enchanter being the only support class labeled on the website is a good idea for a game like Pantheon, which boasts that it will have a quaternity rather than a trinity system? Do we think a single support class is adequate enough to fill the entire role? So, I think this is a question that I've heard come up in other places before, so I thought it was a good one to include here. And I'll give you my thoughts on this first, and then I'll ask you what you think. But I kind of think this is why they changed that fourth role, the label, the title of it, from control to support. Yeah. I think just that word is important because it allows more classes to fill that role. Whereas control was really the only, the enchanter was really the only person who was able to really fulfill a control role. Support, I think, does include other classes, even though they aren't listed as support on the website. We've seen the rogue flex into that support role. Remember how Joppa talks about this? He talks about flexing and something that other classes can do for short periods of time, but it costs them to their how well they play their primary roles. So the question then becomes, which classes can flex into a support role? We've seen the rogue do it, but I think I think there are other classes that can do this. And the shaman comes to mind for me, going from a healing mode into a buff or a debuffer mode. Not to the same extent. Yeah.
We're kind
maybe
of widely defining support here, because when I think
right,
support,
exactly.
I kind of consider does that mean healing is support? Because you're like, what is like support, right? Like,
but it's not control. That's the key, right? That's why I think taking control out of it is key, because support means different things.
Yeah, it's wider than control, possibly like too wide of a term. I think for what it seems to be going for, which is something that isn't a primary damage dealer, isn't a primary healer, isn't a primary tank. It's more like, well, what isn't it than anything else? Because like when I think of the Quaternity, it's more about designating tasks, or like it's roles rather than like classes. Because I think a lot of people think, oh, warrior, tank, paladin, tank, wizard, DPS, or whatever.
Right.
And it's more like what is in their tool belt, and like where's the percentage at? Because while I do actually think that if they launch with just the enchanter in a dedicated quote unquote support role, it seems a little light. And I think that's kind of what the question's a little bit getting at. And I totally on board with, like, they should probably have another support class in at launch. But I think there will be plenty of classes that can support. There we go. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah. No, and I think you're agreeing with what I'm saying. I think we're saying the same thing here. The question is like, how do you list it on the website, right? How do you represent that on the website without sort of going down that path of diluting the main classes, right? I don't think it's good that people look at a website and they only see one class listed as support. But technically, even though I don't technically think that's actually the case, it is what it's representing, right? So that's why I say we've seen this question come up a few times, because it's kind of misleading to a certain extent, I think. But then again, Pantheon's founded on class identity. One of the tenets is class identity, and you don't want to start listing, multiple roles under class description.
Yes.
You don't want to put like the ranger is, DPS / heals / off tank as a third. Like, you just don't want to start doing that because it dilutes it too much. So, and again, it's tough because we're putting a label on something. If you just let it, be what it is, how they end up designing the class, they'll find a role that we maybe haven't even thought of yet, right? Support classes and control classes didn't really, weren't there in the very beginning. They've evolved over time as to what they are. Different games have done them differently, right?
Yeah.
And even within the same archetype, bards and necromancers, which you think of sort of lump in with that control or maybe support grouping, they do it very differently, right? Joppa's talked about the necromancer being a very, I can't remember exactly, it's like a selfish, selfish damage or selfish control. I can't remember how he put it.
Yeah, selfish something. Like, there's something about the necromancer that, does the support or control actions like that's not as, good for everyone else, it seems. Or at least that's how it feels to me. It's like, if you could imagine an enchanter that doesn't, give mana to the rest of the group. I mean, it probably won't be exactly like that, but selfish is a good word.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that they do need to maybe find a way to represent on the website that the Quaternity is going to be a part of Pantheon a little better because it's a little bit lopsided right now, or it's a little bit underserved right now, I guess I would say. Anything else to add on that, Desmond?
Not really, other than it does kind of paint an illusion of incompleteness, which probably isn't a good thing. So, even if Bard and Necro were up there with a with a preface of, may not be in at launch or something, I don't know. To me, that would feel better than just empty space. But
yeah, they need to get that class matrix. Remember the class and race matrix?
Yes.
That, I'm pretty sure it's not on the main website anymore. I think it's been relegated to the wiki or whatever. They need to get that thing back up there because that thing was awesome, right? Even though people disagreed with it, it generated a lot of conversation. And this is a little bit off topic. It's not exactly an answer to the question, but Bard and Necro were on that class wiki, right? Like they, not the class wiki,
I know what you
the class and race matrix. So I'd love if they would get that thing back up on the website. I think that would be awesome.
All in that website update.
Yeah, come on, man. Come on, Minus, get on it. That's not his job. Why don't you read the next question?
Okay. So we've got Shoddy here. It says, what do you expect to find along the mountaintops and clefts after leveling climbing? Would you be disappointed if nothing was there waiting for you? Can you start with this off the cuff?
Yeah, absolutely. Firstly, let me say I expect to find lots of corpses from fallen players on the little in-between clefts, not the tops, obviously, but in between because people are trying. But seriously, no, I do expect to find stuff. And I had a really cool idea, and I'm sure I'm not the first person who's thought of this. What if they put like a dungeon at the very top of a mountain that could only be reached by someone with really high-level climbing? That temple on the top of the mountain, so to speak, the temple in the clouds. So remember, Pantheon's not going to have flying mounts. Joppa said, as long as he's around, no flying mounts. It means the only way you're getting up there is with your own climbing skill, or maybe you've got another player, throwing down a rope or doing something like that. I say think big, to VR when they're talking about something like this, if this was something they were considering, because I think the question sort of conjures up images of like finding a trinket or finding some sort of small item. I'm like, put content up there, man. Like put a dungeon up there. That's what people want, right? Something that's worth my investment in climbing. So that's where I'd go.
I think that's an amazing example. It kind of inspired that scene from The Bait with Dothane, like recalling his brother as they're like going through the tundra and like there's blizzards and all this. And you can imagine, climbing, like actually climbing a mountain with, the climate and all of that to make it to, a dungeon or some, it would feel like some kind of pilgrimage. And that's kind of awesome. I love that. So that's already making my imagination.
I know. The more you're talking about it, I'm like, yes. You know what it makes me think of? I don't know if you've seen... Probably, yeah, but Batman Begins, right? The first of the Christopher Nolan movies, when he's actually going to the monastery and learning to fight, learning from what's his face there, Liam Neeson's character, I can't remember, but it's like climbing this mountain, bad weather, he's just struggling to get to the top, but that's the kind of the kind of thing I'm imagining. I'm actually kind of worried that they won't do this because they do talk about dungeon design a lot, and they've mentioned several times in streams how they want players to look up, like don't think of the places horizontal, think vertically. And so many times in the streams, and not so many times, but at least a handful of times, we've seen it where they just don't do that. Whether that's Co-Carnage or whether that's one of the other streamers who's played or something like that. It seems it seems like our brains aren't trained to look up yet. And I really want them to lean into this verticality and not be afraid to do it because like it's awesome from an indoor environment, but in an outdoor environment, man, it just makes so much sense, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it is a major differentiating factor with Pantheon that they need to kind of maybe emphasize and kind of capitalize on a little bit when, people start realizing that it's kind of a fundamental thing that's different about the game. And that's something to be excited about. Like if you start getting in the habit of trying to climb, surfaces that are just like at the edge of your skill, and finding things, it gives incentive to continue doing that. And another reason to, in your brain kind of think that Pantheon is different, and probably tell other people like, your game doesn't have you, climbing up mountains to get into dungeons, or whatever. So
exactly.
I mean, we're talking about all these like really great examples, and I'm all here for it, but I realize I'm a little bit hypocritical because I've played a lot of games that just have, big worlds that are actually like kind of empty. Like I'll totally throw it out here. It's like Vanguard, the massive world, but there's not something everywhere. But what? I still love like just trying to see if like, even if I know there's probably nothing there, there's still something about it that just still drives me to like to try. So while I want to see all this stuff, and don't take this as a pass, VR, but like if I climb some stuff and find that it's just another ledge, I'm not going to be completely disappointed. But
dude, you're like you're reading my thoughts. That's exactly what I was just gonna say. I actually have it in my notes here as well, that sometimes a climb is just for a view or a vista. Right? Like I would 100% be the person who climbs to the top of a mountain just to see what it looks like from up there, and then just sit there and read the lore in my journal, right? Like read my codex and review all the things I know that the perception pings I've discovered, and all the little breadcrumbs, as we've heard referred to lately. It's a great place to do it, right? Like go up on the top of a mountain and do that. And you're so right about that. Like not every climb needs to be something at the end of the rainbow. Sometimes a climb is just a climb, just to see if you can do it and to get to a cool spot. And Vanguard was like that. You're totally right. And there were lots of places in that game that I tried to get to that were completely empty, just nobody there. I mean, that was, part of Vanguard, but beyond that, for the sake of doing it was a thing. So I'm totally with you.
Well, there you go. But still, we want to see it. We still want to see it.
Yes. So the next two questions are kind of related, so I'll group them together. And the first one's from Xanafel, and they said, how dark do you want nighttime to be, and what creatures do you hope to see? And then Moobert kind of tagged onto that and said, what about like specific nighttime events, like group challenges, things that are centered around like monster raids on settlements, or what if lower player levels could enter specific areas of higher level zones during the night when some monsters sleep? So interesting one. I'm sure you have lots of thoughts on this one.
You should probably go first, because like this might get a little interesting.
Okay, yeah. So I saw actually somebody referenced the other day. I remember where it was, but they reminded me that in EverQuest, when you were early on, there was a spell that the NPCs could cast on you that completely blinded you, where your monitor just screen turned black. It was terrifying. It was scary when that happened. Not just because you were about to be killed, probably, but because you actually thought your monitor might have died. And the reason I'm bringing this up and I'm saying this is because that's the kind of darkness I want. I want that terrifying darkness. And with that comes the creatures that you would think of. Nothing crazy. I've mentioned it before, but I always thought the scarecrows in EverQuest were really scary. Those little pumpkin head scarecrows, they always freaked me out. In terms of, other creatures, we were playing Dungeons and Dragons online, and we ran into an owlbear, which was pretty cool. So I'd go for a giant owlbear in the night. I know Nathan Napalm is a big fan of the owlbears.
Me too.
Are you? Yeah. So yeah, I mean that's kind of some of the things that, just to answer Xanafel's questions a little bit, what I want to see about creatures and what I want the darkness to feel like. What do you think?
I'm so glad I'm like 100% in agreement here. Like I want it to be super dark. Like I know there was plenty of complaints about the Fortress d'Avair stream, where people were like, it's so dark, I can't see. And that could partially be because of the like stream compression and all that stuff. But dang, I love it. Like, I want them to make it so that like you can't just turn the gamma up as well, because a lot of games, they'll make it dark, but then they won't make the game actually like prohibit vision, so to speak.
Right.
And if we're going back to like the friction thing, and this is non-player friction, but environmental friction, where I see it leading to gameplay, and that would be, you know, spells that help you see in the dark, torches, and all this that like leads you to respect your environment and have like, you know, little jump scares and like encourage you to like stick to the roads like at night, right? Like things that kind of actually make the world feel a little bit more real. And I think darkness is a dang good tool for that just is so underutilized now.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the video I did a little while ago about the enchanter in the last co-stream there talked a lot about the spell that the enchanter has, that they can place a light source on the player's shoulder, the little wisp thing. And I think that's really cool. I think that's part of something that we're going to see utilized a lot and going to be sort of requested a lot. People are going to want to have enchanters in their group just for that purpose, or maybe you know, any other class that can create a light source. So as for Moobert's question, I think it would be, this is a tough one for me, because the idea of like enemy mobs coming together at night to do like raids on settlements and whatnot, you know, they've actually talked about some scripted events. There was something that it was quite a while ago, but something about a scripted event at night with werewolves and that kind of thing. But if I'm being honest, I kind of feel like this should be kept to a minimum, because for a couple of reasons. I think it becomes too predictable, too regular, and I also think it turns the game into it becomes its own little mini game in a way. You know, the other part of his question I like more, where it's like you higher level players coming back to an area at nighttime because it's a higher challenge, I think is a good way of dealing with that problem of zones being very limited to, you know, it's a newbie zone, a linear progression of zone experiences. I think this is a way that they can alleviate that or address that. You know, when it turns night, do the low levels all have to go back into their starting city? You know, like, is that sort of what has to happen? Because that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So something like that would be more favorable in my mind.
Yeah, and it sounds nice. Like, it sounds really dynamic. And like a lot of ideas like this, in our heads, it probably is a lot better than it would be in the game. Like,
right.
I would love to see a day-night cycle, like for creatures that like actually like does things, you know?
Right.
But I'm also a little bit too much realist. Like I don't really see this happening in Pantheon. I mean, if they could totally make my day or night. But I think it would be a big step forward for MMOs if they could put some sort of different AI that is associated with nighttime. But I can't really understate the amount of extra work that would be for probably less gain than it would be to add another zone. You know, like that's not a perfect comparison, but like I love these kind of ideas, but it just is so hard to actually put in a game and make it fun. It just often isn't worth it. Sadly. So kind of bummed.
Yeah. No, I know. And I mean, we're nothing if not imaginative, right? Like we're open to, like, you know, we're always up for ideas, and we like, this is what the show is about and a lot of what we talk about. But you're right. I mean, there does come a point where it becomes a diminishing return, you know, on the work that goes into it. But it's a cool idea nonetheless.
I will say, actually, one example recently that actually showed up on you guys' Classes 101 stream.
What was that?
Do you remember when it became nighttime at the Dead Man's Cove area?
Yeah, for sure.
They all turned into ghosts.
Yeah, those electric
those
ghosts
crazy,
that murdered us.
It was crazy. But like, that is a lot less effort, you know, than it would be to, you know, make these like crazy scripted events and and or even try to make them more dynamic where they're not as scripted, even more difficult. So, but just like swapping out mobs for nighttime, like if they change the spawner to pop in these guys at night, that would actually, it adds a little bit of something to the world. So like that kind of thing, I think I would love to see that in Pantheon. So that's my in-between.
Yeah, I totally agree, man. Go back and watch the Fortress Devair stream where me and Nathan Basgrim and Minus got to play, because there's that moment where I see that werewolf outside the window and it was such a cool moment, right? It's nighttime outside and it was awesome. But yeah, it's a good one. Let's move on to the next question. This is from John Wayne, and they said, in light of the server cap and queue issues New World has been having, do you think Visionary Realms can do anything to alleviate it for Pantheon's launch? I know you're all over this question. This is a good one for you.
Okay, all right, here we go. So, from what we've heard of the network stack, it sounds like player population really shouldn't be a technological issue for Pantheon. Plus, just to differentiate these, so New World is action combat. It relies on high server tick rates that make it possible for actions to be super responsive, like down to milliseconds. And Pantheon just isn't that. Obviously, it needs to be responsive, but it's just built in a different way to support a different kind of gameplay. And so I don't see population being an issue in the sense of a technological issue. The issue with population on launch day is going to be about gameplay. So it doesn't matter if a server can hold 5,000 people, right? If at launch, the game is unplayable because 5,000 people are in the same 4 areas, then they're going to want to queue. Like, they're going to want to slowly get people into the world. Because you could imagine, as Pantheon, let's expect the max level to be like 50, right? And it's going to take a while, right? Mm-hmm. So if it takes, let's say, 6 months for fairly hardcore folks to get to level 50, and the server can hold 5,000 people, and we've got, how many races do we have, Theric? Pop quiz. Tick, 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 tick.
Races? 9.
9 races.
Yeah.
Let's say they do the awesome thing, which they totally should do, where everyone starts in their own races area. So it's not like everyone's on an island, So 9 people spread to 5 or 9 races with 5,000 people all slamming the server on launch day, where leveling is slow and people are probably going to be staying in zones in areas a lot longer. That creates a gameplay problem. And so I want to be clear in that I don't think Pantheon's going to have technological problems with this, but I think queues will still have to happen to support good gameplay. There's my soapbox.
It just made me, that's a great point, and it made me laugh because I was thinking of something while you're saying it. So basically what you're saying is, if you don't want to be in the queue, or you're saying there aren't going to be, but let's say there were, just play a Scar, because nobody's going to be playing Scar. So if you want to get into the game quickly, make a Scar character, and you can get in and run around, and then you can make your other real character later.
It would be really funny if they personalized the queue to like the different racial starting places. Because I think you're right. I think I wish the best for our Scar brethren, but it's probably not going to be the most popular race.
No,
and that's right. That's part of its charm, though. That's part of it.
Yeah.
So but that's kind of the issue I'm talking about. Is like, if people are going to run into a queue, are they going to think it's the servers are just not up to snuff? Or if it's like, well, I don't want to get dropped in the middle of 700 other people all doing the starting quest at the same time.
Mm-hmm. It's funny because it's an interesting response from you. I didn't think, I sort of didn't see that path coming, because I think this is a question that's on a lot of people's minds right now because of New World. And my logical brain, says if Amazon had issues with server queues, Pantheon's going to have the same thing. You know, it's just, you can't expect anything more from a small indie company. But then again, you also have to take into consideration Pantheon's not going to have the numbers New World did. They're never going to get close to those numbers. This is just not going to happen. As much as we love it, as much as, the game we're into, it's not mainstream right now. And no matter what they do, it's not going to be as mainstream as a game made by Amazon is on launch day. So you're not going to see 500,000 people in queue for Pantheon. Mm-hmm. I will say on a side note that the issues Amazon experienced, I have to say, the way they did it with offering server transfers at a later date, super nimble move on their part. And people may disagree with me, but I think it worked well, assuming the transfers down the line aren't an issue, of course. And maybe that's a lesson VR puts in their pocket, right, for now. And they just keep that in their back pocket for down the road, because I think that's a strategy. I think that's the kind of strategy you need to take when you're up against a technological limitation. So it's a technological question that I don't have the answer to. So I can only think of it from a logistical perspective. And I think that was a pretty good move on their part.
Yeah.
So if they do run into these issues, and I'm less confident than you are that they won't. So I'm kind of feeling like they will, but you never know. Maybe it's all fine and good, but I think they need to have some logistical strategies at the ready, when the day comes.
I mean, they should definitely have a strategy. I'm sure they will. They're no stranger to MMOs and launch days, and maybe I just have a little too much faith in Kyle and Robert. But as confident as Kyle is, I think he does have something to back it up, and we will hopefully see soon what that actually looks like if they can do a tech demo even of like, hey, look how crazy this is, because they've talked about it enough, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm just going off of what has been said. If they show something that doesn't look as promising, I will absolutely talk about it. But right now it sounds like what they're going for and the type of game that Pantheon is seem to work really well together, and I don't think it's going to be a technological problem.
Yeah, good. Right on, man. Why don't you read the next question?
All right, we've got Shobin. This is a kind of long one, so just sec, guys.
You can paraphrase if you want.
I'm just going to go for it. Sharing quests.
Okay.
At what point in the quest should a new party member be brought in? The very beginning, so that they only avoid talking to the initial quest giver or whatever steps they need to speak with them. Sorry, maybe I should paraphrase this. So it's basically asking, at what point should you bring people in when you share a quest?
Right.
And yeah, so go for it, because this itches me.
Yeah, it's an interesting question when you think about it from a Pantheon perspective. We know storylines and tasks are two different things in the game, right? So,
yes.
It depends on which one you're talking about here. It's easy if you're talking about tasks, but I'm going to take it from the storyline perspective, because I think that's more nuanced. The way they've talked about storylines, these are going to be much larger. These are going to be more sprawling. And if I was Jop, I would use the word robust a bunch here, because that's one of his favorite words.
I got to take a drink.
Every time you hear robust, take a drink when you listen to a VR stream. These are big undertakings. And whereas tasks are more of what you think of standard, go collect this, fetch that kind of drill. But when you talk about storylines, I would say they shouldn't be shareable at all. And maybe that's not something people want to hear, but I think you can tasks fine, but storylines are connected to the perception system. That's what we've been told. And perception is a skill that can be developed. So that's the real key here. That's what causes this to be something I don't think can be shared. It would derail the whole system. If you're able to share a storyline, if you don't have the perception skill to be able to detect whatever it was that started that storyline, I should not be able to just have my keeper friend share it with me, right? Mm-hmm. That's why you become a keeper. Although, again, I'm going to speak out of both sides of my mouth here a little bit, because I have said keepers need to have social value. I think that's something that I've advocated for. And if you were a keeper and could share a storyline, it kind of would give you that a little bit. Maybe you could do it something like you could only give them an indication. It only would allow you to like give them some sort of like hint or general idea. I mean, outside of just telling them yourself in chat or whatever. But if your perception skill, or unless their perception skill was high enough, they're not going to get that trigger. So I don't like the idea of sharing a storyline just because of how intricate it might be. What do you think?
Yeah, I was going to ride that same kind of what I foresee being a semi-unpopular opinion, that I don't think we should have sharing. It's a convenience that I appreciate in the games that are on the market right now because they're built around quests that are boring and impersonal, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so not having sharing would just be absolute tedium. But so, oh my gosh. So I think if we had sharing for storylines in Pantheon, it would really take away from the RPG side of MMORPG, and it would kind of turn it into that same genre of checklists that we're so used to. And like Pantheon has a chance to actually like change that in MMOs. So I'm just like really against anything that kind of just reuses those tropes that we're just like used to. And then the solution to those tropes, like let's back it up a second. We're trying to have the MMO genre take a different branch from, turning in 20 quests all at once that you are going to forget the next 5 minutes. So in that sense, regardless of what the perception system looks like, because I have my idea of what I think it's going to look like, but in truth, we actually don't know. We know, very little about what the perception system is actually going to be, which is a huge problem. Like, I know it's in process VR, but like, we need some clarity on what the design is going to be for this. Because to me, perception is number one on the list of like Pantheon things. Like there's climbing and climates and all that stuff. But like perception, from what I imagine in my head it is the differentiating factor for Pantheon that turns it into a role-playing game that is massively multiplayer instead of a massively multiplayer online checklist,
Yeah.
And so,
it's really well said.
I mean, if we do have tasks that are, kill 10, whatever gnolls or something, maybe. But even so, I would hope that if we have that task, there's a reason for it, for our character. And it's not just the same quest that everyone walking by is going to get. And so this is a big sticking point for me, I think. And I think sharing works great for MMOs that are on the market, and I don't think it's going to work for Pantheon in my book. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think you're probably right there, and I think that we're, again, very of a similar mindset with regard to this. So, interesting to see. I'm definitely perception is one of my top 3 things that I'm interested in learning more about. And they've done a couple streams where they've sort of done some breakdowns of the perception system, but I do think that there is more to see. There's more to learn here. The next question is super silly, and it's from Nemufe, a regular. And they said, since the Scar don't have lips, when a Scar player types in chat, should the letters B, F, M, P, and W be omitted due to them not being able to pronounce them? So some crazy level of speech pathologist knowledge there. And I kind of wonder like how long it took Nemufe to come up with this question. Like, did they sit there and like practice saying things without lips? Like, and if VR actually did something like this, they might be the first company to ever like hire a speech pathologist or like a linguist or something like that to create like the actual sounds. But who knows? Maybe.
I freaking love this question because it's one of those little details that actually kind of sets some games apart. And when I read this question, I racked my brain trying to think of another game that did this, and I have such a vague memory. Hopefully someone in the premiere or the comments will clarify for me, or like feel free to seriously hit me up on the Discord, because I'm going to lose sleep over this. But there's a game out there that will replace words based on a certain factor. Like, I can't remember if it's like if you're a werewolf or something, it like replaces some of your words with like bark or like some...
Oh, that does sound familiar. What game is that? Yeah, you're totally right.
I can't remember. But then, there's the easier method, which is like what I actually really appreciated about EverQuest 2 was they had scripts for like dozens of languages. And obviously, the verbal side of it, because there's a lot of voiced stuff in the game. But if you learned a language, which it was really cool that you could just learn languages in EQ2, and typed in chat, if a person didn't know that language, they would just see it says something in Aerolician that you don't understand, or that, and your speech bubble would show up with the characters of that script. And I was like, that's just such a unnecessary but cool detail. Like,
yeah, unnecessary but cool is absolutely right.
Like, I think that would be easier to implement than like than literally like maybe replacing all of the B's, FM's, P's, and W's.
Yeah, but, that might be a little easier.
But that would be such a cool little detail. Like, I love this question.
Yeah, Nemefe, that's a great question. Come up with some more. So yeah, why don't you read the next one?
So we've got Horsosaurus here saying, I do really enjoy when the quests I do have a visible impact on the world. That usually takes instancing, though. I'd like to hear ideas for having quests leave a lasting impact on the world with no instancing. Oh, man.
Man, my answer here is very short and sweet. I know you have a little bit more to say on this one. Here's what I'll say. I'll leave it at this. It's a cool idea. Doesn't scale well. I think you have to keep in mind the number of players you're dealing with in MMOs, and whenever you change the environment in any kind of a permanent or even a semi-permanent way, it's cool for the person who does it. It's not so cool for everybody else. I don't know the solution to it. I get what a Horsosaurus is saying. Like, you want to break that instancing wall and find a way to do it, but I'm not sure it can be done.
Yeah. Or it can't be done in a game like Pantheon. I think is like, you probably condensed what I would say, but I'm going to dig in anyway, because we're getting through the questions, and this has been a, like I was joking with the whole oops all mailbox episode.
That's right.
But I'll have one last ramble, and then I'll not go crazy anymore, I promise. So I have a friend that doesn't really enjoy MMOs because he feels like anything he does has no impact on the world. And I think this is where this question comes from. There are there are games that kind of get around this, like Guild Wars 2 with the dynamic events happening in the zones, which I actually really loved, even though it's kind of a, one or the other, and you do a thing, you contribute, and then it flips to the other side, and but it's still pretty fun. But it's always kind of one or the other.
And they don't change the zone permanently.
Exactly.
They it's a very temporary thing, and it's sort of transparent. Has always been how I felt about those. Right,
and like, as soon as you see the event happen once, that it's just going to get reset, and or influence back to whatever binary side of the event that it starts at. So here's the sad truth. Everybody wants to change the world. Everybody.
Isn't that a song like that?
I'm not going to sing. So, but yeah, everyone wants to be a catalyst, or at least participate in something that has lasting change. I get that. However, the amount of developer hours it takes to set these things up is impossible to maintain in a typical MMORPG like Pantheon. The world might change as we play. We're going to have expansions. We're going to have updates. Those will for sure change the world. there might even be like some sort of participatory event that you can jump in on, contribute for a certain time, and then there's going to be some ending. But it's not going to be anything that you do that really changes the direction and especially not from the direction the developers intend. And Pantheon's not a sandbox game. Even sandbox games are limited to what can be changed, but that would be like the closest example. So with Pantheon, it's more like we're just kind of here for the ride, And I'm going to get a little cheesy here.
Okay.
We got to get a little bit cheesy. And the real lasting impact in Pantheon, MMORPGs, whatever, it's the friends we made along the way.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
This is true.
I said it. I'm not even joking. I'm laughing, but I'm not joking. Pantheon is not going to be a game where you change the game world. Not like really, at least. So just focus on impacting the players in the game world, and I think you'll find it a much more fulfilling experience.
You know what?
Yeah.
I see it in my head, Des. I see you don't change the world changes you. I think that's the Hallmark card you're trying to come up with there.
Yeah, I'll pass all those out for Christmas to all my Pantheon.
Nice. Nice. That's a good idea, actually.
But like that's basically what I told my friend. I was like, hey, it's not about like I change the game world like you would in a single player RPG. It's because even in a single player RPG, you're not changing the world. It's all scripted.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
But you know what? He still doesn't like MMORPGs, and I think that's fine. But I can't help but try to wipe away the illusion that you're going to jump into a game made by people that is linear, scripted. It's going to be really fun to participate in, but you have to find some other way to make an impact and feel like you made an impact, and it's going to be with people. So yeah, that's
well said, man. That's really good. I really like the way that you put that all together, and I hadn't even thought of that, but as cheesy and silly as we're being about it, you're right. I mean, it's so true, right? That's the core. So
hashtag community matters or stuff like that.
Absolutely, man. Hashtag community matters. That's it. All right, last question, man. Can you believe we've spent over an hour and almost 10 minutes now going through these questions? It's crazy. So last question comes from 10, and we'll do justice. So he asks, and I'll paraphrase, it's a bit of a long question. When you're doing the character creator, when you start a new MMO for the first time, do you just hit random and go into the world with whatever crazy combination of, face, hair, whatever style the game comes up with? Or do you try and create like a close to life facsimile to what you actually look like, maybe a little flair here and there, but do you sort of like get close to home when it comes to your character creation? And this is funny because, again, New World, and we've just both been playing new characters. First of all, let me say before I get to that, who hits random? Like who uses that function?
We have people in Vela that hit random so that they could get in faster. Not even joking.
These people are psychopaths. Okay. I'm just going to say it here. These people are absolute psychopaths. They should be marched out into the open of a field somewhere and made fun of and ridiculed, because that is the most, I can't imagine ever doing that. But whatever. To each their own,
I'm sorry, dear viewers. He knoweth not what he says.
I'm being a little feisty for the sake of it, but you do you, I guess. Seriously, if you have like a mohawk and like a green mohawk and it's like half a mustache and one red eye and one blue eye, like whatever. I do not do that. I try and carefully craft my character to an extent, and I do trying to make them look like myself a little bit. I have to admit, I always go with the long hair, and I try to, goatee, that kind of stuff. And my character New World looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. So, I try to stick close to what I know, I guess. What do you do, Des?
Well, mine actually changed a little bit over the years. So when I was younger, I had kind of a stereotypical, like, graceful, kind of pretty wood elf with like red hair and like tan skin. And it was kind of like my, my alter ego of like who I would be in a fantasy world. Because I always wanted red hair. I always wanted green eyes and all this. And I always wanted like nice hair too, because my hair's all curly as well. Not anymore. But
no, what hair?
Exactly. So, but for when I switched my alias to Desrin, which is kind of a play on my own real life name, I realized that's the same time I started making characters that, looked more like myself. Or like as much like myself as would work with the game, and so yeah, I've transitioned from total like fantasy, not like me at all, to basically about as much like me as possible, but hotter.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah, well, that you have to go hotter, right? Nobody wants to make a less hot version of themselves, right? That's the real psychopath, people who do that, I guess. But I don't know, man. Like, yeah, and I that's kind of been, I've never gone too far afield with my characters, to be honest. Like, I've never been somebody who's been like, ooh, how crazy can I get with it? So I just feel, I need to feel that connection to how they look. So yeah, anyway, that is our mailbox. I hope everybody's stuck with us as we've gone through it, and I hope that we've cleared up the mailbox. If you felt your question was being ignored, it wasn't. We just had a lot of VR news to go through in the last few weeks. So now that we've gone through it, if you want to leave a question, if you want us to answer one of your questions, join our Discord. There is a channel called Rewind Questions, and you can pop in there and just put your question in. And if we don't get to it the one week, we'll keep it there and we'll get to it at some point. So thank you, everybody who's done that for this show and for everybody who's asked a question. And let's move on. No community discussion this week, so straight into the lore we go. Sit back and relax. It's time for the lore you know. Okay, so we are continuing our reading of the official Pantheon lore, not official reading, or nothing official about us. And that is the Bait Part 2. So last week, Dothane witnessed the terrifying power of the Dire. I remember during the premiere, people really liked the sound effect of the Dire of the Dire absorbing the meat in Arakamil's hands. So I'm going to do that again. But they witnessed that last week, and we learned that the Dawn doesn't appear to be the true goal of this quest, as you could have assumed. Instead, Bel Iris gifted Dothane with a blue radiant crystal, within which lives a song known to all dwarves. So, what purpose does this artifact serve, and what is Dothane's true mission? Well, settle in as we read the penultimate chapter of The Bait, as written by Pantheon's lead writer, JN Gerhart. I awoke in the cave once more, drifting and alone. Alone? Had I killed them? I wondered. Had I unleashed Bel Iris's bloom? No, I still had the bloom somewhere. I was certain of it, though I could not remember where I had hidden it. While the words of Ryfel's winter sorrow were indeed echoing in my mind, I had not yet spoken them aloud. Very well, I tried to say, my attempt ending in a dehydrated gasp. I could not even speak those two words, so dry and parched was my mouth from the heat of this cave. In addition, it seemed that coarse bits of fine stone coated my mouth and throat, grinding against my teeth with each dry swallow. Though the grains were much larger than sand, they were nonetheless suffocating. I looked around for any source of moisture that could quench and cleanse my mouth, but though this foul cave was damp, no moisture pooled on the ceiling. Yet, why would moisture pool on the ceiling, I wondered? It must pool on the floor. It was then I realized that the floor was above me, for I was hanging upside down from the ceiling of the cave. My back tensed anew at the revelation. My feet were held fast in a strange viscous husk that seemed to have hardened up to my ankles. The true floor was still several feet below my head. It seemed that my feet were still booted, however. I could not reach any of the walls, each of which still shuddered and seemed to have a constant low rumble behind them. I could swing my body with great effort, but the heat of the cave and the pooling of blood in my skull made any movement an exercise of agony. My armor was still littered on the ground, yet I noticed one piece was missing. My helm, the one I'd cracked in Kakalar, was no longer among the group. Neither was Hammer, yet for some inexplicable reason I felt assurance instead of panic at its absence. At that moment, I sensed the rancid cave stench reach through the deafness of my smell like hot water poured over a rotting tooth. Once more, I was running out of time. It was then I saw my helm moving towards me. It was in the mouth of an insect-like creature that was not much smaller than myself. It hopped along the corridor from floor to wall to ceiling, its arms and legs looking more like a mammal than a bug. Soon there were 4 or 5 more, then 10 and 20. Somehow I knew that these were the wretches who'd hung me upside down and torn my armor from my body. At this sickening sight, it took every ounce of my resolve not to try and sing Winter's Sorrow, unleashing the secret power of the bloom. Yet, Belle Iris had not said I would be spared, or given indication that it would only harm Arakhamel and herself, had she? I simply could not recall what it was for, or why it was significant, or even where it was. Instead of summoning the power of the bloom, I waited until darkness claimed me for one final strike of recollection. The memory of that very morning. From the prow of a long wooden ship, Arakhamel stood watch amidst a storm. The ship was lightly laden, equipped for speed rather than a long voyage. To that end, its power came not from sail or oar, but 4 large sea serpents, 2 lashed either side beneath the waves. The captain of the vessel, a short human woman, bald and anxious, controlled her beasts with a series of strikes against a drum. The cadence of her beats when driving a straight line was effortless, but I found it set my mind in a dull, driftless state.
If the storm does not break soon, we will turn back,
She barked at Belle Iris.
The sea speaks more loudly than coin, understand? We ought not draw near the Vels when such warnings lie about them.
The storm will break, Belle Iris replied. Every time she spoke, I saw the human shake her head as if she could not reconcile the twin voices. Her wide mouth opened to show a row of silver studs in place of teeth. Before she could counter the Archai, Arakhamel pointed Moonfell off the stern of the vessel. The human's beating changed swiftly in response, the sea serpents elegantly turning the ship in that direction. After a few intense moments of pounding upon the drum and speeding upon the sea, the fog of the storm broke into a bright blue sky. Before us lay a series of pure white rocks, rising from the sea like fingers belonging to unseen hands. How many of the rocks there were I could not say, but they stretched on as far as I could see. As we neared them, I realized they were quite tall, some just over a tree in height, others more like a great hill. Between the white rocks were several large islands, their landmass a mix of gray and black stones that continued on to the water's edge. The land was flat and featureless, without flora or fauna, save for orange shrubs that clung desperately to the white stones, and a few colonies of colorful birds that nested in the heights. At last we arrive at your day, Dauphin, Belle Iris said in one deep, rich resonance. Welcome to the Didiglian Vels. The heat is unlike anything I've endured, I said as we reached the shoreline. I should think to lose my armor, else my muscles become a well-cooked meal. A meal you may yet be, she replied evenly. We will all be better served if you keep it on, Lord Thane. Arakhamel stepped off the boat before it came to a stop, his calloused feet bare but unconcerned with the sharp rocks on the shore. I waited for the serpents to stop churning the water, but it appeared that would not happen until the captain fed them, which she would not do until I debarked. She dumped several pitched jars of indecipherable filth over each side into greedy mouths. I was once again thankful for my limitations of scent. I turned to the shore and stopped. For all along the shoreline there were bones, bleached by Sirius, the sun, into a uniform sheen. Fish, serpent, bird, human, elf, and dwarf, no doubt. Everything I could think of, and countless more I could not, lay littered on the shore like 100 puzzles all mixed together. The dawn had already crushed several walking up the rise before us.
Wizard,
The weathered captain yelled.
I'll be setting off now.
She pointed to the bones on the shore.
Before any of those can start acting up.
Belle Iris placed her hand on the ship, spoke a few words, and then turned and began walking up the rise after Arakhamel. As she did, a great sheet of ice began to form on the front half of the ship, encasing it in a frozen vice, anchoring it to the shore. When the spell ceased, the ship itself was stuck to the shore, with no hope of coming free until the lock had thawed. We thank you for continuing to support our efforts from here, Belle Iris said, her back turned to the speechless captain. Should we be detained longer than the morning, you will be free to go. I followed Belle Iris quickly, for I had nothing clever to add and no time in which to deliver it. And that's the lore you know. And we have one more, I'm hoping one more segment. This is a long read, so I don't want to go too far, but I'm going to try and get it all in for the next week. So we'll do the finale next week and finish up the bait. So
Yeah.
I hope everybody enjoyed that. Yeah, and brings us to the end of episode 74. Desrin, as always, man, thanks so much for joining me and being my awesome co-host. I hope that you had fun going through all these questions with me.
Gladly. And thank you, anyone that's actually stuck around through hearing me rant so much. Appreciate you.
Yeah, so a little bit of a longer episode today too, which is kind of cool because I wasn't sure if these questions would take us too long. But yeah, so thanks for hanging out with us today. If, as always, you'd be so kind as to just leave a like on the video and subscribe if you haven't already to the channel, and go to your YouTube or your podcast platform of choice and leave a review. It helps the podcast grow. It helps bring people into the Pantheon community, and we always appreciate it. So thanks again, Des, and everyone else. Have a great week.
Have a great week, everyone.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Pantheon Plus Rewind. Pantheon Plus is not affiliated with Visionary Realms. Be sure to check out our Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube channels under the name Pantheon Plus. You can follow Theric at Pantheon Theric on Twitter, and Desrin at DesrinDoes also on Twitter. And you can stay up to date with all things Pantheon at www.pantheon.plus. Until next time, cheers, and thanks for listening.